I married a stranger for one night only. Just 24 hours earlier, I was sitting alone at Gate 42 at O'Hare International, trying not to cry over my lukewarm coffee. Life had not gone as planned. My fiancé had left me 3 weeks before our wedding, ran off with a coworker. The vendors were non-refundable. The honeymoon was already booked. And I had taken the week off from my job as a nurse, hoping to be on a beach, not in a terminal with puffy eyes and a crushed heart. "Is this seat taken?" a voice interrupted. I looked up and saw a tall man with kind eyes and a half-smile, pointing at the empty seat beside me. "No," I said, probably sounding more broken than I meant to. He sat down, and after a few silent moments, he asked, "You okay?" I don't know why, but I told him everything. The cancelled wedding. The pain. The quiet apartment. The aching silence of love gone wrong. He listened. Really listened. Then he told me his story. Nathan was flying back to North Carolina to say goodbye to his grandmother. She had raised him when his parents passed away in a car crash when he was just 10. She had stage 4 cancer and only a few days left. Her final wish, he said with a sheepish laugh, was to see him get married. She had always worried he'd end up alone. He was too busy running his carpentry business to date seriously. He smiled sadly. "Crazy thing is, I told her I met someone. Just to make her happy. Said I'd marry her soon. And now I have no idea how to face her." We laughed, in that sad way people laugh when life feels like a cruel joke. I don't know who said it first. Maybe it was me, maybe him. Maybe it was the universe speaking through both of us. What if we got married? He stared at me, blinking. Not for real. Just enough to make her smile. Enough to make her believe her boy got his happy ending. It was insane. Completely unthinkable. But something in his eyes told me it wasn't about lying. It was about love. About doing something good, something selfless, for someone else's peace. We boarded that night. By noon the next day, we stood in his grandmother's living room, decorated with hand-picked daisies and string lights borrowed from neighbors. A retired preacher who once taught Nathan in Sunday school agreed to officiate. His grandmother, too weak to stand, watched from her armchair, her hands shaking, her eyes bright with tears. She whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart," and held my hand like I was truly her granddaughter. After the vows, she asked me, "Will you take care of my boy?" I nodded, unable to lie to her, yet not quite telling the truth either. She passed away peacefully that night, a soft smile still resting on her face. The next morning, Nathan and I walked to a nearby diner, the early sun warming the dewy grass. We were quiet. Something had shifted. Something neither of us could quite explain. "We should get an annulment," he said gently. "Yeah," I replied. But I didn't want to. And I could tell by his voice, neither did he. We spent that day walking the small town, talking about everything, our pasts, our dreams, our scars. We laughed. We cried. It was like we had known each other for years. And when I finally boarded the flight back to Chicago, I left with a heavy heart and a folded piece of paper in my jacket pocket. 5 years later, our story became a favorite among friends and family, told at dinner tables, in wedding toasts, even in random grocery aisles when people recognized us from the small-town paper that had picked it up. The couple who married for one night, and stayed forever. But what people didn't always see were the quiet, ordinary days that followed. The days when love wasn't grand gestures or fairy tale vows, but small, consistent kindnesses. Nathan and I built a life slowly, piece by piece. We moved into his grandmother's old cottage, planted a garden in her honor, and opened a small woodworking and wellness studio together, him with his hands, me with my heart. We called it Grace and Grain. Locals would ask about the name, and I'd just smile and say, "It's a long story, but it started with Grace." There were challenges, of course. Learning to love someone you barely knew, even with good intentions, meant unlearning old habits and healing from old wounds. There were days I questioned the risk I took. Days I missed the predictable life I had planned. But then Nathan would reach across the table, take my hand, and say, "You didn't save my grandmother's life, but you gave her peace. You gave me peace. And every day, you keep doing that." One winter night, while sitting by the fireplace, I found the note he had written me tucked inside an old book of poetry. "Maybe one day, we'll do it again, for real this time." I smiled. We had done it again. For real. For love. For something that mattered. We began hosting Sunday dinners for people in our town who had no family nearby, widows, foster kids aging out of the system, quiet men who sat alone in cafes. Every chair at our table was a story waiting to be heard. Every hand held was a reminder that love doesn't always knock, it sometimes stumbles in, exhausted and unannounced, asking, "Is this seat taken?" And we always made room. Because that's what changed us, that night when two strangers chose hope over hurt. Not because it made sense. But because someone needed kindness, and someone else had the courage to give it. One night of love. A lifetime of meaning. It still amazes me. And maybe that's the point. Life doesn't ask for perfect timing or perfect people. It asks for brave hearts, willing hands, and a belief that even the most broken beginnings can lead to something extraordinary. So if you're out there, waiting for love to find you in the right way, at the right time, just remember this. Sometimes, it finds you when you're helping someone else find peace. And that kind of love, is worth everything. 3 years into our marriage, something happened that changed us again. Not like before, not with vows or candles or whispered promises, but in a quiet hospital room, under fluorescent lights, where I sat holding a child I wasn't sure I'd ever meet. His name was Luca. And no, he wasn't ours, not yet. It started when I volunteered to help with a local foster outreach. A 6-year-old boy had been dropped off with nothing but a backpack and a stuffed raccoon missing one eye. His mother had passed from an overdose. His father was unknown. He didn't speak. Didn't smile. Didn't eat much. But when I sat beside him that first day and offered him a peanut butter cracker and whispered, "It's okay. You're safe now," he reached for my hand and didn't let go. That night, I told Nathan, "I think we were meant to find him." He nodded before I could even finish the sentence. "I think he was meant to find us," he said softly. Fostering Luca wasn't easy. He had night terrors that left him screaming into pillows. He hated closed doors. He flinched when someone raised their voice, even in laughter. But little by little, we built him a new world, one with bedtime stories, pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, and a garden patch that we let him name. He chose Forever Field. When I asked why, he simply shrugged and said, "Because forever lives here." 6 months later, the court granted us adoption. I will never forget the look on Luca's face when the judge asked him if he wanted to stay with us forever. He didn't speak. He just ran across the courtroom, leapt into Nathan's arms, and held on with everything he had. Now he's 10. And every night, before bed, he asks for the story of how I married a stranger for one night only. He giggles every time I say, "And I said I do to a man I didn't even know." And every time, I end the story the same way. But he wasn't a stranger for long. He just hadn't found me yet. It's strange how life unfolds when you stop trying to control it and just let it happen. How a broken engagement led me to an airport bench. How one selfless lie gave a dying woman peace. How a fake marriage turned into a real love story. And how a quiet little boy, lost in the system, found a family in a home built on wild faith. Sometimes, life doesn't give us what we asked for. It gives us what we needed. And love? It rarely shows up the way we expect. It shows up with a broken backpack. With calloused hands and tired eyes.